examples. We use this as part of the, actually this is prepared by the District of North Vancouver to make the point about how we develop. And Kate, you notice I've taken all the stuff off of distractive. Just Richard Bowes of North Vancouver District has been quite proactive in terms of how to communicate this kind of stuff to the residents and council to using his GIS system to identify 2 properties of about the same size, one a 1950s house, one a 1990s property, just to illustrate and make the point to council that in the 1950s, the way people developed, the hard surfaces were only about a third. You know if I'm walking through.
No, you're okay.
So just think of think of any 1950s house you have, right? And then of course now think in terms of any of these houses built in the 1990s. Well, the hard surface is now roughly half, right? And so what does that mean? In this case, it would have been worse, but so long as that a creek and there was a tree covenant under the riparian regulations. So in this particular property, the tree, the riparian regulations actually makes it better. What he wanted to show, and this is what he showed council, was that how things. Yeah, you start off. This is represents 1950s development, and his whole point was, the council was, well, look, things are getting worse, and you're wondering why in McKay Creek, which has been fully built out for 50 years, we have major erosion problems. That was his basic point to council, because you changed the site characteristics. There's more runoff. We're dealing with more problems in 2000 than they did in the year 1960. And they also then did some scenarios showing, well, even with this 1990s development, if they approached things differently, he was able to demonstrate as an example, hey, they could have done better. So we're showing how, and this is the message he had to council was, we're not progressing, we're going backwards, we're making things worse. But we could do that. So the only point about with this slide was, it's a tool that enables you to build a scenario comparison. So where we are now, after 2 years of basically changing out the engine and integrating a tool called QUALHYMO, we're literally a week or 2 away from taking the beta status off the current water balance model, and it will be the new version which meets the needs of engineers, goes beyond just being a planning tool. This is where I want to call Kate to help me out. Describe to people the outcome of the Cowichan series and what we're going to do.
I'll be brief. We had a similar series in the Cowichan Valley where I think it was more of a mix within the group. It wasn't quite so much engineers. We had building inspectors, we had planners, we had subdivision approving officers. We had a couple of interested consultants that we work with. And the idea was essentially, when we took some of this information that Kim's kind of gone through with you to the regional board really liked the idea of moving towards water-centric planning. We'd just finished the Cowichan Basin water plan that really looked at some pretty substantial challenges between supply and demand. And we recognized that certainly there are a number of areas within the Cowichan Valley where we're essentially drawing down our groundwater much faster than it's actually being replanted. So they're really struggling with those particular issues. And so we went forward to them and said we'd really like to do a sort of a train the trainers and really train the frontline staff in every single organization in the regional district so that when you're standing at that front counter speaking to a property owner or a major land developer, that they're not using the language that we hear quite so often. You people are doing this to me, or how come when I go next door to the next municipality, I can do all of these other things which you're making me do differently here. So we really wanted to work on building a team, regional team, to give people that sense that they weren't alone in that progress, and also to allow them to sort of meet each other in an offline way through professional development. We offered professional development credits through the course. So we went through that process. I think it was pretty successful at the end of the day. I think we started with about 65 folks, and over the course of the summer and people's vacation, it kind of ebbed and flowed, but we ended up with probably about a little over 50 folks towards the end. Yeah, we want to change water use in terms of policy. We're going to be changing some of the metrics and some of the expectations, particularly when we look at the new provincial policy, which is really big language right now. How do you put it into action on the ground? And so the next session is we've decided that instead of just creating a policy that we tell our major developers, this is what you're going to have to do, we're going to have a forum where we invite, it's by invitation only, to our major developers in the area, asking them to come and join us for the day. We've asked essentially, it's going to be a two-part day, so they're going to come, the major decision makers. It's always a challenge when you invite, who are they going to bring? We recognize that some of these folks are incredibly busy and time is money, so we've asked them to join us for about an hour and a half, 2 hours in the morning, and they can leave their technical staff behind for the remainder of the day. So we're going to hear some of the large ideas in terms of the tool. So we'll be saying to them, this is where we're going, this is the tool that we're going to be using, or we're thinking that we'd like to be using it. We really want to work with you to make sure that when we put our policies into action and we create the bylaws, that you understand them and that you've got an opportunity to inform them. So we want, and we're asking them to be sort of the early adopters within the communities. We'll work with them to make them successful. And what we're putting here is some of the language in Bill 27, which allows us to decrease development costs and decrease permit time. So we're saying, if we're successful at the end of the day in building this model that works for you and it works for us, this is the benefit to you. So we have staff that are now trained and understand some of the water balance issues, have a general understanding of when they get the output from that program, that they'll be able to fast track it. They won't be looking at one set of engineering drawings and not understand the language or not understand the philosophy. So it's a consistent approach. And so we're going to have essentially 3 case studies. One is Bamberton, which is development of about 2,000, between 2,000 and 3,000 homes if you include secondary dwellings. So we'll be using that as a case study on their sort of a watershed scale. We'll be looking at a community kind of neighborhood scale with another development, and then also we're not quite sure at this point what the individual home sort of site development is. So we want to give them 3 examples of how they might use this tool in a way that's really straightforward for them, and invite them into the dialogue in the same way that we invite our peers into the dialogue.
That's good.
Okay.
Yeah, and just trying to think what else to add to that, because I think just the other thing, just to elaborate a bit, is that in 2004, the city of Courtenay hosted one of the first water balance model training workshops when we were doing a number of pilots to different audience groups, and it just happened that in your case, it was tailored to the stewardship committee. In fact, Kate, you took that course. That's right. And the difference between 2004 and today is in 2004, I mean, we weren't charging for it, but in effect, in the workshops today, we sold seats in a computer lab, and so it's a totally different approach to move from selling seats in a computer lab than to have a letter from the chair of the regional district inviting specific individuals who you've already sounded out, and such that when you mention the case study, we should say that we've asked for volunteers to use their projects to develop the case studies, and we will support them technically to show them, to keep it simple, because in coming into our forum, it's so they can present to us what they've learned. And so in terms of how we're going to be structuring that day, just to add a little bit of detail, the morning we're calling establishing expectations, which is the regional district, the local government saying, well, this is what we want, right? This is what we want and why. And in the afternoon then becomes, okay, this is how you meet expectations. And that's really, it's in terms of the user group and the reviewer group, I was going to say it's role playing, but no, it's real playing, because with these 3 case studies, in effect what they're doing then is making the pitch to the local government reviewers and the guys from development services, basically from the various municipalities, of how to use the tool and present the output to expedite the decision. So that's the uniqueness of it, as opposed to, hey, we got seats in a computer lab.